Temporary duty assignments, TDY, can sometimes be fun and exciting, but this one was not. It was 30 days of almost round-the-clock hard work. Every year, the U.S. Army participates in a rapid deployment exercise. Several units from across the Army are selected to participate and are airlifted, with all their equipment, to Germany, where they engage in a month-long exercise with their NATO counterparts. My name is Fred Sadler. At the time, I was a relatively new captain in the U.S. Army, working in the Operations Division, stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. This deployment came at the worst possible time for me to be away from home. My wife was pregnant and expected to deliver sometime during the assignment. Lydia and I had been married for almost 6 years when the deployment began. My commanding officer said, "I give you a personal guarantee that I will do everything in my power to get you home before the baby is born." And he kept his word. At the end of the exercise, I packed my things and was about to board a plane. I called Lydia, and she told me she thought she might be hospitalized within the next couple of days. "Then the timing must be perfect because I'm on my way home," I told her. It was dusk as I was driving to the airport when a deer suddenly ran into the road. My driver swerved to avoid it, and the next thing I knew, I woke up in a military hospital in Frankfurt. My right arm, right leg, and 3 ribs were broken, and my right lung had collapsed. "How long have I been here?" I asked the nurse. 5 days, she replied. "Is my wife here?" "No, sir." I called Lydia. "Are you okay?" were her first words. "Don't worry about me." "How are you and the baby?" I asked. She began to cry. "We lost the baby, Fred. I'm so sorry." "Are you okay?" I asked again. "Physically I'm fine, but emotionally I'm a mess." 2 weeks later, I was flown home on a medevac plane. Lydia met me and accompanied me to the Fort Hood Hospital. She was still emotionally devastated, but our time together seemed to help both of us. I stayed in the hospital for another 2 weeks before I was discharged on limited duty. 2 years after the loss, we were transferred to Heidelberg, Germany. We spent 3 years there, traveling across Europe. While in Germany, I was promoted to major. After those 3 years, we were transferred to Fort Lewis, Washington. As a major, we were assigned field grade officers' quarters, which were much nicer than company grade, complete with garages, not just carports. When we moved into our cabin at Lewis, all the belongings we had taken with us to Germany were returned. We unpacked those boxes, along with the ones we had stored before leaving. Using a box cutter, I opened one of the many boxes and began pulling things out. It was a box we had stored while we were in Germany. About halfway down was a small wooden box I didn't recognize. I placed it on top of a stack and opened it. My life changed forever. Inside was a small stack of envelopes tied with a pink ribbon. I untied the ribbon and picked up the top envelope. It was unsealed. Inside was an official document labeled, birth certificate. As I read it, my mind began to blur. It stated that a baby girl, weighing 7 pounds 6 ounces and 19 inches long, had been born alive. The date matched the one Lydia had told me was the day our baby had died. The baby had been named Hope. The certificate listed Lydia Jane Sadler née Johnston as the mother. Where the father's name should have been, it simply read, unknown. I picked up the next envelope, also unsealed, and pulled out a multi-page document. It was an adoption certificate. I read it over and over. The document confirmed that a child named Hope, born to Lydia Sadler, had been given up for adoption and that all parental rights had been relinquished. It further stated that, since the father's identity was unknown, his consent was not required. How many men had she been involved with during that time? Did she even know? She had to know. Even within marriage, we all need a degree of personal space and honesty. I drove to the golf course, parked the car, and headed to the 19th hole, where there was a bar and diner. I ordered 2 eggs over medium and corned beef hash, my favorite breakfast before Lydia started changing my eating habits. I managed to eat most of it and then sat out on the deck while golfers finished the 18th hole and went inside. When I got home, it was mid-afternoon. She had made significant progress unpacking boxes and organizing the house. I went to my unit and into my office. No one was there except the duty officer. I sat at my desk and tried to work, but my heart wasn't in it. When I returned home that night, it was past midnight. She was in bed, reading. I undressed, showered, and said, "I'll sleep downstairs," before walking out and closing the door. I had just turned on the TV and was getting comfortable on the couch when she came in, took the remote, turned off the TV, and stared at me. "Cut the crap. Tell me what's wrong, and I'll either help you or leave. Which is it? I haven't done anything wrong, so I'm not going to stand here and let you yell at me or dodge out of the way when you try to run me over emotionally." I walked over to her, took the remote from her hands, and turned the TV back on. "Have a safe trip," I said. She left less than an hour later. On Monday morning, I talked to my commander and told him everything, even showing him the documents. He was as dumbfounded as I was. "What do you plan to do?" he asked. "I'm not sure." "She didn't say where she was going when she left." "No, sir, but she didn't take everything, especially the box." There was a pause before I spoke again. "I've been thinking about trying to find my daughter, if she really is my daughter, and go from there." "It'll be virtually impossible," he said. "In adoption cases, confidentiality is extremely important for both parties." "I understand," I replied, "but I have to do something. I need to start somewhere, and I no longer trust her to tell me the truth." Then it hit me. I literally jumped up. "Oh my God, I have an idea. Can I have the day off?" "Sure," he said. I saluted, ran out of his office and the building, and jumped into my car. At home, I opened the box, pulled out the wooden one, and dumped its contents on the floor. Among the items was a pacifier, one that Hope must have used before being taken. I put the box back together, sealed the pacifier in a clear plastic bag, and got online to find a local DNA lab. I found one in downtown Seattle. In the bathroom, I saw that Lydia's things were gone, but I rummaged through the cabinet under the sink and found her old hairbrush. I sealed it in another plastic bag, added it to the one with the pacifier, and headed straight to the lab. "We'll call you in about 3 weeks," the technician said. I didn't hear from Lydia for another full day. "Hi," I said when I answered. "Are you feeling better?" "Better than what?" "Better than the idiot you were a couple days ago." "Nope, same old idiot." "Why?" 3 weeks. That's when I'll know whether I'm going to cut you out completely or just divorce you." I ended the call. She called back immediately, but I ignored it. The next day when I got home, Lydia was already there. She met me as I pulled into the driveway. She was furious. "What do you mean you're going to either cut me out of your life or divorce me?" Exactly what I said. "I think I deserve an explanation," she said. "So do I." "About what?" she asked. "You don't think you owe me any explanation at all?" "That's exactly what I'm talking about," I replied. "So there's no hope for us?" I asked, putting deliberate emphasis on the word hope. "What do you mean there's no hope for us? What have I done?" Then it hit her. "Oh my God, no. Please, no. I'll be back in an hour. And you'd better not be here. I leave for work in the morning at 6:30 and return at 5. By then, I want all your things out of this house." I left. When I came back an hour later, she was gone, and so was the box, along with some of her belongings. That evening, the house felt nearly empty. She had picked out almost all the furniture and taken it. She left only my favorite chair and the guest bedroom set. The next morning, I called my office to say I'd be late, then contacted Post Housing to arrange for temporary government furniture. I also called the credit union, our stockbroker, the insurance company, and other organizations to handle the usual post-separation formalities. I made an appointment with a JAG officer. I knew they couldn't represent me in civilian court but could provide legal guidance. They confirmed what I feared: she would be entitled to half of everything. We lived in government housing, so we didn't own a home, but we had enough savings to buy one if we chose. Both our cars were paid off. Life went on. I went to work, handled chores, mowed the lawn, washed and cleaned my car. Then, one morning, the phone rang. "Hello," I answered. "Is this Major Fred Sadler?" "It is." "Major Sadler, this is Margie from the DNA Analysis Center. A few weeks ago, you submitted samples for testing." "Yes. The results are ready. You can come in to review them." "Can't you just tell me now?" "I'm afraid not, sir. We can either mail them to the address you provided or show them to you in person. For privacy and verification, we cannot release results over the phone. I'll be there as soon as I can." I walked in, introduced myself, and asked for Margie. She came out, we shook hands, and she asked to see my ID. "Come with me, please," she said. I followed her into a small room, and she returned a few minutes later with the results. She handed me the pacifier and said, "Sample A is yours. Sample B is from the hair you gave us. Sample C is from the pacifier. We determined that samples B and C are biologically related. Sample A is not related to either B or C." "Thanks," I said. I put the pacifier in my pocket, took the paperwork, and left. I sat in my car. At least I wasn't the father of a child calling another man Dad. But someone else did. JAG was not authorized to recommend specific law firms or attorneys, but the JAG officer I spoke with was able to provide me with a list of approved attorneys and firms. The next day, I started calling them. I made 6 appointments. At the 3rd appointment, I found the right attorney. He was a retired JAG officer and had strong opinions about infidelity, regardless of who committed it. I spent over an hour telling him my story. When I got home that night, there was a letter in the mailbox. It was from Lydia. "Fred, 3 weeks are up. Lydia." Short and to the point. The return address was her parents' home in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. I called her. "Hi, Fred," she said. "I won't talk about it over the phone, and I'm certainly not flying to Pennsylvania, so I guess you'll have to come here." "If you mean Seattle, I'm already here," I told her. "I sent the letter last week when I was still there. I'll be at the house at 6:30. Come over then." She hung up. I didn't make any special arrangements, no drinks, no food, nothing. This was meant to be a straightforward conversation. I laid out the DNA documents, my copies of the birth certificate, and the adoption papers on the government-issued coffee table. She pulled into the driveway at 6:20 but waited until exactly 6:30 to ring the bell. I wasn't in a rush to answer. When I opened the door, I invited her in and gestured to the chair she should sit in. I sat on the couch, she sat in a stiff-backed chair across from me. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the pacifier, and held it out to her. She grabbed it and held it to her chest. "Thank you," she said, as if I'd handed her something priceless. Then I handed her a copy of the DNA test results. "You already know I'm not the father, but this confirms it." She took the results with her left hand. The pacifier remained clenched in her right. "I take it you're sample A?" she asked. "Yes." I then pushed the rest of the papers toward her without a word. She leaned forward, read the title on the top sheet, and tears welled up in her eyes. She set the DNA results aside and picked up the dissolution of marriage application. She started reading, but tears were falling freely now, blotting the pages, so she put it aside. "Can I have a tissue?" she asked. "I don't have any." "You're not making this easy for me, are you?" "You cheated," I said. She nodded. How many times? I asked. Does it matter? No. I just want to know. One weekend. Different men. Just one. Yes. Who is he? Does it really matter? I think I deserve to know. I'm not going to tell you. Do I know him? I'm not going to tell you. So you'd rather protect him than try to save our marriage? She picked up the divorce petition. Our marriage is over anyway. Why ruin it further? Okay. But you have to tell me one thing. Why did you lie and say our daughter didn't survive the birth? She looked down. When I found out I was pregnant, I wasn't sure if it was your baby or his. I thought about ending the pregnancy, but I couldn't. Over time, I tried to convince myself that you wouldn't be able to tell either way. Then we found out it was going to be a girl, and I became more convinced you wouldn't know, because I believed there's a special bond between fathers and daughters, and that if she wasn't yours, you'd somehow sense it. As her birth approached, I got scared. Maybe you'd notice. Then you had to go on that assignment, and I was relieved. When you said you were coming home, I got nervous again. It was a mess of emotions. Maybe you'd be there, maybe not, maybe you'd know, maybe you wouldn't. Then she was born. She was perfect. They placed her on my chest, and I fell in love instantly. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. You have brown hair and brown eyes. No one in either of our families has blonde hair and blue eyes. I knew she wasn't yours. But I loved her. And I loved you. I knew I had to choose. I chose you. The hospital helped me. I told them I wanted to place her for adoption. Within 24 hours, the papers were in my hands. They asked who the father was. I said I didn't know. They said that would make things easier, no need to seek permission. I held her in my arms. She was sucking on the pacifier when they brought me the papers. I had to say something to you, so I lied. I said she didn't survive. I said her remains were cremated. When you came home, I couldn't believe you didn't ask to see a death certificate or anything else. I still can't believe it. I trusted you, I said. I had no reason not to. And I didn't want to deepen the pain by digging into documents. Eventually, she said, life went back to normal. I was almost happy. But a part of me was missing. It still is. And it gets harder every year on her birthday. I would take out her birth certificate, touch her tiny footprints, and hold her pacifier. Sometimes I wanted to put it to my lips just to feel close to her. But it had some of my dried breast milk on it, and I didn't want to lose that, so I never did. They must have scraped it off at the lab. Oh my God, it's gone. She gasped, then stared at me. It's gone. Her milk is gone. You idiot. You took her milk. She fell to her knees, curled into a ball, and sobbed on the floor. I picked her up gently and placed her on the couch. I couldn't let her leave in that condition. I covered her with a blanket and went to my bedroom, though I didn't sleep. Hours passed. Around midnight, I heard the toilet flush. I came downstairs. She was sitting on the couch. Would you like some coffee? I asked. Yes, please. She sat quietly at the counter while I brewed a cup. She took a sip. I guess I got cold feet, huh? Sort of. We sat in silence, drinking. More? I asked. Yes, please, she said. Where are you staying? I asked, brewing a second round. At the motel. You were there for over 3 weeks. No, I was with my parents most of the time. Do they know the truth? I asked. No, I lied to them too. I told them you and I were going through a difficult time and I needed to get away for a while. They paid for me to visit. They think I came back to help sort things out between us. She looked around, walked over to the coffee table, pulled a pen out of her purse, sat down, signed the divorce papers without even reading them, and left. When I woke up, it was the middle of Sunday morning. I spent the rest of the day thinking. On Monday, I took the signed divorce papers to my attorney and he filed them. I kept wondering who Lydia had been with. She never told me who he was or how the affair started. What made me the angriest wasn't just that she cheated and got pregnant, it was that she defended the guy and refused to tell me anything about him. The only detail she ever gave me was that it had happened over a single weekend. Fortunately, I was so busy at work that I didn't have much time to dwell on it. 2 weeks later, I was back at Fort Hood, where Lydia and I had lived when her daughter was born. Normally, military seminars are pretty intense, but this one was relaxed. We were divided into groups of 3 to work on a project. There were 6 groups total, and 2 of us were left over, a major from Alaska and myself. We developed a close friendship almost immediately. It felt like we'd known each other for years. His name was Keith Franklin. He was stationed in Alaska at Fort Wright, the coldest base in the U.S. Army, but he loved it there. He was a computer genius, and we were so far ahead of the other groups that we had to slow down to let them catch up. On Friday of the first week, we had lunch at the officers' club. He shared his personal story. He had cheated on his wife, she divorced him, and now she was living with a civilian, and his 2 kids called the other man Daddy. Toward the end of lunch, I opened up and told him everything. When I finished, he had a strange look in his eyes. "And you don't know who the man was?" he asked. "No, she never told me." "And this happened here at Fort Hood?" "Yes. About 5 or 6 years ago. Blonde hair and blue eyes, right?" "That's what she said." "Come with me." We went to the Manpower Center. Everyone stationed at Fort Hood passes through it. We walked straight into the HR director's office. She saw us, stood up, and came around her desk to give Keith a hug. She looked to be around 60, had a spark in her eyes, and I liked her immediately, even before she said a word. "Aunt Lucy, this is Fred Sadler." "Hi Fred," she said, shaking my hand. "Hello, Mrs. Healy," I said, reading her nameplate. "Call me Aunt Lucy, everyone does," she smiled. "Aunt Lucy," Keith began, "do you remember a fair-haired, blue-eyed officer who might have been here about 6 years ago?" She thought for a moment. "No, but I don't always see everyone who passes through here. They all have to check in, but that doesn't mean I meet them all." She thought a little more. "Fred Sadler, you were here around that time, weren't you?" "I remember that name." "Yes, my wife and I were stationed here," I said, glancing at Keith as if to ask how she could possibly remember. Keith smiled. "Aunt Lucy has superior autobiographical memory. She can remember almost anything she's ever read, seen, or experienced. That includes people. She remembers everyone she's met." "Sam?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "it's either a gift or a curse." "Or a curse," Aunt Lucy echoed. "Very few people have it. Aunt Lucy is Fort Hood's institutional memory, especially for personnel matters. Unfortunately," she added. I looked from her to Keith, then back. "You remember everything that happens to you?" "Everything that happens to me personally," she said. "Jesus, how do you have room for it all?" "We don't know," she said. "It's just always there." "Does it have any downsides?" I asked. "Oh God, yes. I remember the good and the bad. If I'm not careful, it can cause depression." "I can only imagine," I told her. "Aunt Lucy," Keith said, getting us back on track, "Fred is looking for someone who was here at the same time. All he knows is that the guy had blonde hair and blue eyes." She laughed. "That's it? No height, no weight, no rank, no assignment, not even his initials?" "No, ma'am," I said. "Calling me ma'am is a waste of good oxygen, Fred. I'm Aunt Lucy. Give me time to think. Maybe I'll remember something." I might ask around too. Does it really matter? She asked, glancing at Keith. It does, I said. It's important. Okay, she said. Was he about your age? Yes, around the same age I was when I was here. And he was in the army? I assume so. Officer or enlisted? Probably an officer. So you're not even sure he was military? No. He might have been a civilian employee. That's not much to go on, she said with a chuckle. There can't be more than 2,000 blonde-haired, blue-eyed men I've seen in the last few years. But I'll see if I can narrow it down. She took both our phone numbers. 2 days later, she called Keith. I've been thinking about that man you asked about, she said. I don't remember any blonde-haired, blue-eyed soldiers, either officers or privates, who were the right age, but I do know 2 civilians who work for the Office of Postal Engineers. One of them has been there for about 30 years, so he's probably too old. The other has been working there for about 10 years, he's currently in charge of new construction but used to head the plumbing department. His name is Kurt Weber. There are about 15 other blonde-haired, blue-eyed men on post, but their ages don't match, and I didn't bother remembering civilians living off base because I assumed that when Major Sadler was stationed here, he didn't have time to build many civilian friendships. Keith told me all this, and I immediately started planning how to meet Weber, find out if he was the right man, and maybe get a little revenge. Men who prey on the spouses of military personnel are among the lowest forms of life, and those who do it while the service member is deployed are even worse. They deserve the worst fate imaginable. The next morning, I parked my rental car on the next street over from Weber's house, hoping he'd be heading out soon, maybe to play golf or make a trip to the hardware store. I waited nearly 2 hours until I saw his car pull out of the garage and speed down the street. Thank God. I didn't want to sit there all day, but I would have if I had to. I followed him to Home Depot. We both parked, and I trailed him into the store. He clearly knew the staff, chatting casually with a few employees. Near the entrance was a counter with a coffee urn, and I knew from experience that regular contractor customers could help themselves. Weber grabbed a coffee and stood there sipping it, talking with one of the salesmen. As I watched him, I realized that this man may have not only had a physical relationship with my wife and gotten her pregnant, but he also chewed gum with his mouth open. Other than spitting on the sidewalk, I couldn't think of anything more repulsive. When the clerk he was talking to stepped away to help another customer, Weber finished his coffee, spit his gum into the paper cup, and walked off while unwrapping another piece. I went to the trash can, looked inside, and saw it, the coffee cup with the gum right on top. I checked to make sure no one was watching, then took the cup and walked quickly back to my car. I called Keith and told him what I had. He laughed and told me to get back fast. He said he might have something even bigger by the time I arrived. When I got there, Keith was practically bouncing off the walls, waving a few pages in the air. "You're not going to believe this," he said, grabbing my arm. "Look at this." "No, sit down first." I sat, and he dropped the pages in front of me. I scanned them. "So what?" I asked. "That's Hope's name, address, and her new family's name. Her name is Sarah now, Sarah Randolph." I hacked into the records of the adoption agency. These files are encrypted tighter than the nuclear launch codes carried by the president. He paused, then admitted, "Well, I didn't personally hack them, my brother did, but same difference." I started to laugh. "That's great, Keith, but what exactly am I supposed to do with this?" "I don't know. Maybe blackmail someone." "Oh, that's brilliant," I said sarcastically. "I can already see the headlines. 2 Army officers try to blackmail a 6-year-old foster child." He laughed and tossed the papers onto the coffee table, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, I see where you're going with that." He got a little flustered again. "But we cracked their defenses. That's something." "Yeah," I said, still chuckling, "that's something." I carried the papers and the coffee cup back to my BOQ and placed them on the desk. I didn't know why I did it, but I looked up the address where Hope lived and drove there early Sunday morning. It was almost 200 miles to Corsicana. The house was a typical suburban home. I sat outside for about an hour, taking in the usual sounds of American suburbia, lawnmowers humming, children screaming and laughing, neighbors chatting. There was no activity from Hope's house until nearly noon. A car pulled into the driveway. A man was driving, a woman sat in the front passenger seat, and a child was in the back. The woman got out, closed her door, and opened the back to help the child. I was ready with my phone. She unbuckled the child, placed her on the ground, and knelt to fix her dress. I had just enough time to snap a few photos. Then I heard a sound next to my car. A woman and another child were walking by. Sarah, the child next to my car, called out and ran toward the other little girl, who I now realized was Hope. They met only a few feet from my car, and I took a few more quick pictures. I started the engine and drove off before either of the two women took notice of the strange man parked on their street. I drove a short distance away and stopped to look at the pictures, for were absolutely perfect. I could even make out her blue eyes. I drove back to Fort Hood. The following week, Keith and I finished the course with ease. We graduated on Friday, had dinner and a few drinks together, and on Saturday morning, we went to the airport and flew home, Keith to Alaska and me to Seattle. The following Monday was a school day, so I had the day off. I took Lydia and Hope's DNA reports to the DNA testing center. The woman there didn't remember me until I reminded her about the pacifier. I handed her Lydia and Hope's DNA results and the coffee cup with the gum. "See you in 3 weeks," I said as I left. In fact, it only took 2 weeks this time. She gave me the results over the phone. "It's a match, mother, father, and child." "No doubt," she said. She added that the official results would be mailed. I had all the information I needed, but what was it for? What was I going to do with it? All it really confirmed was that Weber was indeed the man Lydia had cheated with. I went to Walmart, bought paper and envelopes, and made copies of 2 photographs of Hope, along with the DNA reports for Weber, Lydia, and Hope. I cut off anything on the reports that could identify where they came from. I put everything into an envelope, making sure I wore gloves from the moment I opened the bag of paper and box of envelopes to the moment I sealed the package. I used self-adhesive stamps and moistened the seal with water, not saliva, to keep the envelope as untraceable as possible. I addressed it to Mrs. Kurt Weber at their home address and also included Lydia's name with her parents' address, since I had no idea where she was. I drove to Seattle's main post office and dropped the letter into the mailbox. I didn't know what would happen in Texas, where Fort Hood and the Weber family lived, once the package arrived. The news from there was about a month old when I got a call from Aunt Lucy. "I'm going to ask you a question and I want an honest answer," she said. "I'll do my best. Whatever you're doing isn't good enough, I need complete honesty. Is this what you and Keith did to Weber?" "Aunt Lucy, I don't mean to sound clever, but what exactly did we do to him?" "Set him up so his wife would file for divorce." "Okay, here's the truth, Keith had nothing to do with it. I sent the package." I told her most of the truth, but left out Keith's role. Aunt Lucy sighed. "Well, you certainly stirred up a hornet's nest. Apparently, when his wife received your package, she didn't know if the DNA was his or someone else's, so she tested him herself. She also included the profiles of the woman and the child. They matched. And that's when everything fell apart." "Who was the woman?" I asked. "The one he was flirting with?" "She was my wife, Aunt Lucy." "Oh Jesus. I thought it might be something like that." "Well, he was brought into the office yesterday and he's not taking it well. He was ranting and raving all over the base." "Good," I said. "Hearing his marriage is over is the best news I've heard in a while. I just feel sorry for his family. It was already over for me, Lydia and I were divorced, and Weber was now heading down that same road. I folded all the papers Keith had given me, put them into a folder, and stored them in a box with other things I no longer needed but wasn't ready to throw away. Life was moving on. Over the next few months, I went on a few dates, but nothing serious happened. 2 years later, I returned to Fort Hood. I was surprised. I had expected to be sent overseas like 90% of my classmates. Once back at Hood, I found myself in Aunt Lucy's office. "How did you end up back here?" she asked. "I have no idea," I replied. "Yes," came a voice from behind. It was Lieutenant Colonel, newly promoted, Keith Franklin. He walked into the office, closed the door, and we shook hands. It turned out I needed an assistant, and a major who had just graduated from CGSC was exactly what I needed. "So I asked him," he said. Keith and I had talked a few times since the seminar, but we hadn't seen each other in person. I was glad to see my friend. After registering, I took 2 weeks of vacation. The first thing I did was look for a house. Lydia and I had been saving to buy one. I had assumed she would get half of it in the divorce, but since she didn't show up in court, I was awarded everything. The branch manager at the bank walked by and introduced himself as Dwight Randolph. "We moved here about 6 months ago," he told me. "Settled in a brand new neighborhood. The houses are really nice and surprisingly affordable. You get a lot of value for your money." He then went to his office and came back with a business card for the agent he had used. I called her, and it only took 3 days to find the house I wanted. I paid more than half the down payment and the bank was happy to finance the rest. I started working with Keith and moved into my new home. The first things I bought were a big recliner, a large TV, and a lawnmower. I was spending my first night in the house. It was already dark, and I had no curtains or drapes, barely even enough sheets to cover the large front window. I had just opened a beer and was holding a slice of pepperoni pizza in my hand when the doorbell rang. I had long since abandoned the no-red meat diet Lydia had insisted on. I opened the door, and there stood a woman. "Hi, neighbor," she said. "My name is Samantha Randolph, but everyone calls me Sammy. We live in the neighborhood too. We haven't been here long ourselves, and I just wanted to say hello, introduce myself, and let you know that if you need anything, just ask. Is your wife here?" I smiled. "Fred Sadler. No wife, divorced." I saw her frown slightly, but I added, "Don't worry, I don't throw wild parties, loud or quiet." She smiled, and we chatted for a few minutes before she left. My first week in the new house flew by. On Saturday morning, 3 women rang the doorbell and brought food, and decorating ideas. They had seen my house lit up at night with nothing but a chair, a TV, a beer, and pizza inside, and decided I needed help. Sammy Randolph was clearly the ringleader. A couple of hours later, I had a gently used but nice leather couch, a dining table with chairs, and a small coffee table to keep the pizza off the floor. The women were about to leave when 3 small children came running in, chasing each other. One of the women, Ruth, grabbed 2 of the kids while Sammy knelt beside the third and brushed the child's blonde hair from her blue eyes. "Calm down, Sarah," she said. "This is our new neighbor, Major Sadler." The little girl looked at me confidently and said, "Hello, my name is Sarah." I leaned over and smiled. "Hi, Sarah," I said, looking into her bright blue eyes and golden hair. I shook my head slightly. "How old are you, Sarah?" "I'll be 7 soon," she replied. After they left, I went into what was going to be my den, found the right box, opened it, and pulled out a folder. Inside were the photos I had taken. It was the same child. I hadn't paid much attention to the adoptive parents' names before, but now I did. The adoption papers named Dwight and Samantha Randolph as Hope's adoptive parents. Sammy and her friends helped decorate the house over the next few weeks. When it was done, we hosted a neighborhood open house. Sammy invited her sister-in-law, Joni Payne, who happened to be divorced. I hadn't enjoyed female companionship in a long time, and Joni and I hit it off right away. She was the last to leave the party, and I couldn't wait to call her the next day. We met for lunch and had dinner with Dwight, Sammy, and Sarah. Sarah didn't stay long, she wanted to go play with her friends. Over the next few months, Joni and I spent more and more time together. The first night we spent together went well. We were sitting at the kitchen island when the doorbell rang. I threw on a robe and answered it. It was Sammy. "Good afternoon, Fred," she said, walking in. We were wondering, then she saw Joni. "Well, what do we have here?" she asked, heading toward her sister-in-law. Joni was sitting on a stool eating a ham and cheese sandwich. As Sammy approached, Joni set the sandwich aside and turned to face her. Her robe was slightly open, and Sammy reached out to close it. Joni laughed. "Too late for modesty, sis. He's already seen everything. In fact, never mind." "Sammy," I said quickly, leaving the room to get dressed. When I came back, they were still talking about my bedspread. When they saw I was dressed, they both went quiet. The following weekend, Dwight and Sammy asked Joni to watch Sarah while they went out to dinner. We were in the backyard watching Sarah play in her sandbox. Without looking at Joni, I said, "She's a beautiful child, isn't she?" "Yes, she is." "Did you know she was adopted?" "Really?" Joni asked. "Yes. They've had her since she was born. According to the adoption agency, the birth mother was married, had an affair with a man she didn't really know, and became pregnant. Her husband was in the military, and she didn't want him to find out, so she gave the baby up. Dwight and Sammy were there to take her home. Sarah is the name they gave her. That wasn't her original name. No, her mother named her Hope. It's on the birth certificate, but Dwight and Sammy changed it. Sarah suits her better." "What happened to the birth mother and her husband?" "No idea. The agency seals their records tight. The birth mother can't contact the adoptive family, and vice versa." Sarah came over and wanted to sit on Joni's lap. She leaned her head against her and fell asleep almost instantly. A few minutes later, Joni asked me to carry her into the bedroom and put her to bed. It was the first time I'd ever touched her, and I felt strangely uncomfortable. I gently laid her down. 7 months later, Joni moved in with me. A year after that, we were married. It was a very happy year, until the army stepped in. We were assigned to Germany for 3 years. We made 2 trips back to the States, once when her father and Dwight's father passed away, and once for a family reunion. Both times, of course, we saw Dwight, Sammy, and Sarah. We saw Sarah at the funeral, but when we returned for the reunion, she was away at camp. After the 3 years, we received orders to report to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I was going as a newly promoted lieutenant colonel, assigned to the post headquarters as an executive officer under the post commander, a position normally reserved for a full colonel, not a junior LTC, but I didn't mind. In the military, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. To help me get settled, the staff organized a series of briefings with the various departments supporting the post. One of the briefings was to be given by a representative from the Postal Engineering Department. When I arrived, several people from that office, including the postal engineer himself, were already seated in the conference room. I took my seat at the table as a blue-eyed civilian stood to begin his presentation. His hair was slightly blonde, with a touch of gray. He introduced himself as Kurt Weber. I just stared at him. He spoke for nearly an hour, but I didn't hear a single word. My eyes never left his face. It was obvious he was uncomfortable with my fixed gaze. At the end of his talk, he asked if I had any questions. "Tell me, Mr. Weber, have you ever been to Fort Hood?" "Yes, sir. I worked in the engineering department there." "Did you like it?" "Yes, sir." "Why did you leave?" "That's rather personal, sir." "You're right. I withdraw the question. I just like to know the people I work with." I paused, then added, I seem to recall a scandal at Fort Hood's engineering department a few years back. Know anything about that? I vaguely recall something. There was talk of someone cheating, if I remember correctly. Ah, well, I just remembered something. Thanks for the briefing. If you need anything at headquarters, feel free to contact me. I pointed to the name tag on my uniform. Just in case you forgot, Sadler. Sadler, Fred Sadler. Wouldn't want you to forget it. I kept my eyes locked on his as I spoke. I saw the recognition dawn in his expression as his face shifted through shades of red and pale gray. I stood up and walked away. That afternoon, I learned Mr. Kurt Weber had requested a transfer. Unfortunately for him, the request had to go through me. When I received it the next day, I scrawled my response in bold letters, I have plans that involve Mr. Weber's expertise. He will play a key role in the realization of these plans. The following day, to almost everyone's surprise, Mr. Kurt Weber tendered his immediate resignation. I signed it. Every day, I fell more and more in love with Joni. She became more beautiful in my eyes with each passing week, and every morning I looked in the mirror and saw a graying, aging man who couldn't understand what she saw in him, but I was grateful. We cherished our time together, and the years flew by faster than I wanted. We were stationed in Alaska and eventually visited Kenai to see Sammy and Dwight. On our first evening, they told us about a decision they had made with Sarah, who was almost 18. She had always known she was adopted and now wanted to find her biological parents. Dwight and Sammy supported her decision, but the adoption agency offered no help, citing legal limitations. That night, all we heard was how outdated the laws were and how reforms were needed, especially because it's important for adoptees to know their biological parents' medical history. They had decided to try a DNA and ancestry website. Sarah submitted her DNA and waited for results. She hoped her birth mother might attend her high school graduation, but it was only a couple of weeks away, so they doubted it would happen. That night, Joni and I were in bed when she asked, "What are you going to do?" "About what?" "About her." "Come on, Fred. Married couples shouldn't have secrets." She looked at me. "I found your little file 6 months after we were married. Sarah doesn't need to send in her DNA, you already know who her birth parents are." "Oh crap," I muttered. "Yeah, oh crap. Why have you stayed silent all these years?" "I'm not sure. I guess I knew it would be emotional. And Dwight and Sammy didn't need that disruption. But now it's important, and you have to face it. Any suggestions?" "Just tell the story. How do you think they'll react?" "Dwight's my brother, he'll handle it fine. Sammy's the wild card." "Okay. Tomorrow, we'll get Sarah out of the house and tell them." She leaned over and kissed me. "Do I ever bore you?" "What kind of question is that?" I said. "Of course not. Because you haven't touched me all day," she teased. I grinned and reached for the buttons on her pajamas. "I can fix that right now." The next morning was Sunday. Sarah was picked up by her best friend, and they went to the mall. I gathered the 4 of us around the kitchen table, took a deep breath, and began. I told them that Joni and I had packed before coming downstairs, just in case they wanted us gone afterward. They looked at us, and Joni shrugged. "Sarah doesn't need to give DNA to find her birth parents." "I know who they are," I said. Their expressions told me I had to explain everything. So I did. I told them the whole story. When I finished, I took a long breath and looked around the table. Dwight just stared at me while Sammy had tears in her eyes. After a few seconds, she stood up, walked over to me, took my hands, pulled me into a hug, and said, "Oh, poor guy, living with that all these years and not being able to talk about it. No one deserves that." She hugged me again. "What do you think, Dwight?" she asked her husband. "I'm trying to calculate the probability of how we all ended up together." "I don't think there's a big enough number," he replied. So what do we do now? Sammy asked, returning to her chair. I think Fred should contact his ex-wife and invite her to the graduation, since Sarah wants her there, Joni said. Yeah, why me? I protested. Because you started it, Dwight grinned. But who's going to contact Weber? Not me, I said, and told them about the last time I saw him. You never told me that, Joni said. I didn't realize you knew the whole story, did I? She leaned over and kissed me. I thought, I love this woman. Later that day, when Sarah returned, Dwight and Sammy told her everything. She was both nervous and excited and wanted us to move forward. The only way I knew to contact Lydia was through her parents, if they were still alive, if they still lived in Mechanicsburg, and if they still had a landline. I waited until Monday morning and hired a private investigator. I asked him to help me locate Lydia's parents and Kurt Weber. It took him 2 hours to get the parents' phone number. Weber took longer. I called Lydia's parents, reminded them who I was, and told them I needed to speak with Lydia. I gave them my number to pass along. Not an hour later, my phone rang. Hello, this is Lydia Bowman. I was given this number. Hi Lydia, Fred. Yeah, how's it going? I asked, trying to sound casual but drawing a blank. Actually, I'm doing great. How are you? Very well. Lydia, I need to talk to you about something important. Okay, go ahead. Not over the phone. Tell me where we can meet and we'll talk in person. Explain it to me. We haven't spoken in years, and suddenly, out of the blue, you say something is so important that it needs to be in person. That's right. I'm sorry, Fred, I'm not buying it. Okay, but just remember, I gave you a chance. A chance at what? Come on, Fred, what's going on? Only in person, Lydia. Call me if you change your mind. Wait. Wait, okay, damn it. We live in Vegas. That's better. I'm flying out tomorrow. I'll call you when I land. You decide where to meet. The next day, we met in the lobby of the Bellagio Hotel. I guess she wanted a public place. Hi Lydia. Hello, Fred. This is my husband, Roland. Roland Bowman. Hi Roland. I turned my attention back to Lydia. I need to speak to you alone, for 10 seconds. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Roland. Fine. This is about the daughter you had. She went pale. Can we still talk? Yes. He knows about her. Okay. Let's sit. We found as quiet a corner as we could, given where we were. I suggested something to drink. Wine will do, she said. We agreed on a red, and I ordered it. We waited while it was poured. I paid for the wine and we all took a sip. Her name is Sarah. She's graduating in 2 weeks, and she wants you to be there. Roland and I watched as Lydia fainted, wine glass still in hand, without spilling a drop. Roland caught the glass, set it down, and gently patted her cheeks until she came to. What did you say? I repeated it, then pulled out a picture of Sarah and showed it to her. She started to cry, gently touching the photo. She's beautiful. Where did you get this? I took it yesterday. In her living room. You took it? How? Why? I told her the whole story, beginning to end, including our failed attempt to find Kurt Weber. She was stunned to hear I knew his name, shocked again. After the initial shock wore off, she grew visibly angry. Why didn't you ever tell me? Why did you keep her from me all these years? Her voice rose. Roland stood and said firmly, calm down. You gave up all rights to her. Fred is technically breaking the law by even telling you this. So chill out. She sat back, quieting. When can I see her? At her graduation, if you want to come. Of course I'll come. Can't I see her sooner? You both need time to adjust. Take your time. How about we arrive the day before? She asked with a hopeful smile. That would be wonderful. Now, how about I take a picture of you? So she can see what you look like. Okay. We stepped outside, found a good spot, and I took the photo. When I started to leave, she rushed over, hugged me, and kissed my face and head. Not too demonstrative, is she? Roland asked, laughing. I decided I liked him. That same afternoon, I flew back to prepare Sarah. I showed her the picture of Lydia. She's beautiful, Sarah said. She was very nervous, but excited too. For the first time since I'd known her, she hugged me. Thank you, Uncle Fred. Now we know where you get your beauty, Sammy said, snuggling against Sarah. Do you know what my birth father looked like? Sarah asked timidly. The three adults looked at me, eyes wide, waiting. I paused, then said, let me tell you this, you got your blonde hair and blue eyes from him. They all let out a quiet breath. We had only taken a week's vacation, so I had to return to Alaska, but Joni stayed behind to help prepare for the big day. I promised to be back 2 days before graduation. The day before I was due to return to Kenai, I got a call from the private investigator. The most he had found about Kurt Weber was that after leaving government service, he took a consulting job with a Middle Eastern government. Like several other American consultants, he disappeared shortly after arriving and hasn't been seen since. I met Lydia and Roland at the airport and drove them straight to Sarah's house. When we entered, she was standing in the middle of the living room. I let Lydia go first. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then Lydia spoke. I brought you this, she said, pulling a small pacifier from her purse. It was yours. I thought you might want it back. Story 2. My girlfriend and I had been together for a little over 2 years. I met her on a dating app, and we went out for coffee one day. We instantly had a good connection, and our coffee date turned into a late movie screening. We didn't really want to leave each other. We had only been dating for a few weeks when I asked her to be my girlfriend, and we both deleted our profiles on the app we met on. I was really excited to be with her. Historically, I've had some trouble maintaining healthy relationships, and I felt like something was different with her. I let my guard down, and I was vulnerable with her. When we initially started dating, we never had a discussion about our previous sexual history. We discussed testing and things like that, but I didn't feel it was appropriate for me to ask her for her body count. She eventually told me on her own without me even asking. She told me that it was only 4. It sounds misogynistic, but I was happy it was so low. She had 2 long-term boyfriends and a couple of short flings, but other than that, she didn't seem to be the type of person who would hook up with people randomly. My body count was only a little bit higher than hers, so I thought we were a good match experience-wise. Everything was normal with us for the first part of our relationship. We weren't living together just yet, but I was considering asking her if she wanted to take that next step. I thought I saw a future with her. She was different from all of the other girls I dated, and I wanted to spend my life with her. The issue first arose when I noticed she was getting calls and text messages from a couple of different men. Given my past relationship history, I was a little wary about that at first. I never wanted to be seen as the kind of guy who was controlling or possessive, so I bit my tongue about it for a while. One day, I saw a FaceTime video come through while I was with her from one of those guys, well, call him Fred. She rejected the call, but I decided that I wanted to ask her more about it. She told me that it was just a friend from college and he had been wanting to reconnect and go out now that he was back in the city. She made it seem like it was platonic. I didn't have an issue with her being friends with men, I was friends with women, so I knew it wasn't inherently bad. She didn't tell me why she was rejecting Fred's calls and putting him off, though. It made me think that something might have happened with them, or she might have been trying to avoid hurting his feelings. It was possible that he had some kind of crush on her, and she didn't want to get involved with that. A few weeks went by, and I was supposed to go out to dinner with her. It had been a busy week, and I was really looking forward to getting away and spending time with my girlfriend. Unfortunately, she cancelled at the last minute. She told me that she wasn't feeling well and had a migraine. I offered to bring her some comfort food, relax with her at her apartment, and watch some movies. She told me she just wanted to go to sleep. Later that night, I pulled up my phone and scrolled through social media as I always did before bed. I clicked on one of her friends' Instagram stories and saw that they went out to a club. I didn't see my girlfriend in the first few images, but I noticed her sitting in the background in one of them. She was sitting at a table next to a couple of guys in a very revealing outfit. One of the guys next to her was obviously into her, and just from the way she was looking at him in the image, I could tell she was into him too. It wasn't enough for me to think that she had cheated on me right away. At the very least, I knew that she had lied to me. I didn't understand why she would lie. If she had been invited to go out with her friends and wanted to do that, I would have understood. I couldn't help but feel that there was something else going on that she felt the need to lie about. I did some digging through her other friends' Instagram and Snapchat stories to put together who was in attendance that night. On that night, I could see that Fred was at the club with her. I had already been kind of concerned about what was going on with them. She had already told me that he wanted to hang out platonically with her, so why was she lying about it? From his social media, I learned that he had just moved into the city with his long-term girlfriend. I didn't know the full story, but it looked like they were together when they were in college, and they either had a long-distance relationship or rekindled something after some time. It made me feel good knowing that he was in a relationship because I thought it would lessen the chance that he was trying to sleep with my girlfriend that I didn't say anything to my girlfriend about it. When I saw her the following day, she seemed really out of it. I figured she was either faking the illness or she was hungover. We watched a movie together, and she fell asleep about halfway through. I was curious about what happened, so I looked through her phone. I started with her text messages. There was a long exchange between her and Fred about getting together now that he was back in the city. I already knew that he wanted to do that, so it wasn't surprising. What surprised me was how much he was begging her to give him another chance. From the context, I could tell that they had dated or slept together before in the past. I knew that he wasn't one of the people that she told me about when she went over her sexual history with me, so that was another thing she lied about. At the end of their message exchanges, she told him that they would see each other at the club and see where it went from there. It sounded like she was giving him a chance to date her again. I was already pretty heartbroken about that. I really trusted her, and I wanted to be with her long term. Over the past few days, she had lied to me so much, and I had every reason to believe she either cheated on me or planned to cheat on me. I found several unsaved numbers in her phone where she and whoever was on the other end were making plans to get drinks or go for coffee with each other. There wasn't anything explicit in those messages, but it seemed like she was going on dates with the people. I saw that she had Hinge downloaded. She had a profile with recent pictures and recent messages with men. She had given some of them her phone number. The last thing I looked at was her notes app. I found the list in the notes where there were dozens of men listed with a date and a brief description of a sexual encounter. At the very bottom of the list was Greg, and she described how they hooked up in the bathroom at the club. I found my name on the list, and it was around the same time she and I started dating. There were several other men listed, and all throughout our relationship, there had been other men listed as well. I felt stupid. If she had been sleeping around with so many different people, how would I not have noticed anything up until that point? Was I really that naive? I screenshot a lot of the information that I found and sent them to myself, and then I deleted the screenshots while my girlfriend was still asleep. I left her apartment and went home to mine, and I broke down about everything. I felt massively betrayed, and I didn't know what to do. I told my girlfriend everything about my past, and she assured me that she was different, and I believed her. I slept on everything, and when I woke up in the morning, I saw that my girlfriend had texted me a few times asking me about where I went. I didn't respond to them right away. I needed to think about what I wanted to do. I was going to break up with her for sure, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that I wanted to get some kind of revenge on her for what she did. She went out into a public place surrounded by several of her friends and cheated on me with another guy. She humiliated me in front of all of those people. I wanted to do something similar to her. I responded later in the day and told her that I had a minor family emergency come up and I had to leave. I told her that everything was fine and I was okay, but I offered to take her to that dinner again that night. She agreed to go, and I told her to get dressed up because I was taking her to a nice place. She seemed excited. I was able to score some last-minute reservations at a place in the city that she had always wanted to go to. I picked her up before dinner, and I drove her there. We checked in and got brought to our tables where we ordered some food. I told her to order the most expensive thing on the menu, and I ordered a very nice bottle of wine for the table. As we both ordered, I could see the bill was going to be upwards of $500. It was more than either of us could afford at the time, for sure. At the end of the meal, I pulled up my phone and read the list of names that I found on hers. She was surprised, to say the least. Her face turned bright red, and she looked like she was about to vomit. She kept asking me to stop, but I didn't. Our conversation was very animated, and a lot of people around us turned to look over at us while we talked. I made it as clear as day that she had been sleeping with all of those men and lying to me about it. When I was done, I walked off and told her that we were breaking up. She tried to get me to come back and talk to her, but I didn't want to. On my way out, I told the person at the front of the house that the bill would be paid for by her. It was the least she could do after cheating on me with so many different guys. I drove home and immediately looked through Fred's social media to find the contact information of his partner. I sent her a message through Instagram showing her the screenshots of the message exchanges between him and my girlfriend. I never got a response from her, but I checked back from time to time, and after a few days, I saw that all of their pictures together were deleted from her Instagram. I could only assume that they'd broken up. I have received several Venmo requests from my ex-girlfriend for the entire cost of the dinner that I made her pay for.